Jewish audio on Chabad.org.
Likutei Torah, Parshas Balak, page 67a. Mi mono afar Yaakov umispar es Rova Yisrael. Who has counted the dust of Yaakov, or numbered a quarter of Yisrael? Immediately there's a parenthesis. Bigmara say Perigimel de Nida, Daf Lamadalef Amad Aleph, Rabbi Vayigash Perek Tzadek Dalad Gabe Kol Nefesh Haba, Vayikra Perek Aleph, Bamidbar Perek Beis Parshas Balak B'Shir Hashirim Rabba Seif Parshas Ketapuach Ba'atzei Uba Pasuk Achas Yinosi Uba Pasuk El Guinness Bekeheles Rabba B'Pasuk Kol Hanacholin. Here in this reference to the Gemara in Nida Daf Lamed Aleph Amad Aleph, the Gemara says over there, Dorash Rabbi Abohu. Rabbi Abohu expounded, what does it mean? Mimona afar Yankiv mispar es Reva Yisrael. Melamed says the Gemara, Shahakadosh Baruch Hu Yoshev v'Sefer es Revi Yisem Shal Yisrael. Hakadosh Baruch Hu sits and counts the cohabitations of Yisrael. Mosai Tovei Tipet Zahashat Tzadik Noitzer Hemena, awaiting when the drop will arrive from which a tzaddik will be created. And this is what Bilam was looking at, and because of that he became blinded, as the Gemara says over there. So the idea of Afar Yaakov, as Rashi translates, are the children of Yaakov, and we're going to focus now, what does it mean, Rova Yisrael? Says the Alter Rebbe, Rova Yeshvei Beis Pirushim. Rova has two interpretations. Pirush Echad, one is Chelik Revius, that means a quarter. Vahabeis Miloshen Arba, and the second is number 4. So a mispar as Rova Yisrael can be translated as one is a fourth, umispar, the number of a fourth of Yisrael, or umispar as Rova Yisrael, the 4 aspects of the Jewish people. Because by Yidden there are 4 aspects. And the Inyan is Dechsiv, because it's written in our Pasuk, V'lechvodi barasav yitzartiv af osisiv. The Pasuk in Yeshaya says, everything that is called by my name and exists for my glory, I have created it, barasav yitzartiv, I have formed it, af osisiv, also made it. V'heim bechinas machshava dibur u'maisa, and these 3 expressions of barasav yitzarativ anasisiv correspond to the 3 levels of thought, speech, and action. Barasav u'bechinas machshava, I have created it, refers to machshava, shehu yesh me'ayin, because just like a thought which falls into a person's head comes from nowhere, so too the idea of Beriah, yesh me'ayin, creation, something from nothing, comes from nowhere. It's something from nothing. Yitzarativ, hu bechinas hadibur. Form, the world of Yitzira, comes from dibur, shehu bechinas tzura shemetzayer ha'osia shebamachshava. Because speech is giving form to the ideas in the mind. Afosise bechinas hamaisa. I have made it as referring to deed. And so we have barasav yitzarativ asisiv referring to machshava dibur u'maisa. Ksiv beloshen af. However, in the third expression, af asisiv, there's an additional word af. Af means also. Also I have made it. Lefi shahamaisa davar nifred bifnei atzmoi, because deed is something quite separate than the other 2. She'enei ke'erech hadibur neged hamachshava shemitzair ha'osis hamachshava mamish, because it's unlike dibur, speech, which in speech you give form to the letters of thought, because what you think is what you say. Whereas deed is something separate. This is actually a raid in the letter Hey. The 3 lines of the letter Hey refer to Machshava Dibur Maisa. So the right part of the Hey, which looks like a Dalet, you have Machshava and Dibur, and the 3rd line in the Hey, which is separate than the other 2, is the idea of Maisa, and it's separate because it's distanced somewhat from thought and speech. Now, there's a 4th aspect, which is higher than the previous 3 Machshava Dibur Maisa, the Nirbas Memilas Av, and it's hinted to in the word Af. Ki afu loshen ribui, because when we say Af, this is an expression of including something else, l'rabos oid dover, she'enoi mefurish kan, including something which is not mentioned here. V'hu hadover, and that is shalamayla mehashlosha bechinas alolu, is higher than these 3, v'gavoy v'nela mihem, and is higher and hidden from them. So in other words, we actually have 4 aspects. We have Barasiv, Yotzarativ, and Asisiv, which correspond to Machshava, Dibur, and Maisa. And then we have the idea of Af, which in fact is higher than the others, but it's written in connection with Maisa. And to explain this, we need to understand what is the whole purpose of the descent of souls to this world? Because we know that descent is for the purpose of ascent. But we need to understand what is the ascent. Because before the soul came down to this world, it was basking in the ray of the Shekhinah. What can be greater than that? And so for what purpose did it come down to this world? Also, we need to take a look at the concept of thought, speech, and action as it exists in the supernal worlds, which corresponds to Barasiv Yitzartiv, because the Navi tells us that my thoughts are not your thoughts. So how can we possibly compare the process of thought, speech, and action above? And Hashem doesn't have any form of body. So how do we understand these concepts in the supernal realms? But the matter is, the matter is as follows. The whole production of the worlds and their emergence from a concealed state to a revealed state is called Devar Hashem, the word of Hashem. So, for example, by a human being, speech reveals to another person what is hidden in their thought. So too, by way of parable, the world was created, as it says in Pirkei Avos, with 10 utterances. These are utterances, combinations of letters, which go from a hidden state to a revealed state, and to create something from nothing. It says in Pirkei Avos over there that the world was created with 10 utterances. The world could have been created with 1 utterance. So the Mishnah goes on to explain there why the world was actually created with 10 utterances and not 1. but it could have been created with one utterance. And it says, with the spirit of his mouth, he created all the hosts. Pirush ruach piv. What is ruach piv? The spirit of his mouth. Hu bechinas havel ha'elyon. That is the supernal breath. V'hu maimer echad ha'koilo. And that is what is referenced in Pirkei Avos when it says, "V'haloiba maimer echad yochel hi boros." Couldn't he have not created the world with one utterance? That is the one breath, the one maimer that could have created the whole of creation. Maimer, as it says, Baruch Omer v'yoseh b'maimer echad. Blessed be he who says and does, and that is the one maimer. In other words, in speech you have the hevel that comes up from the lungs through the throat, and there through the vocal cords and the various openings of the mouth, it limits and divides that single breath into letters. So you've got maimer echad, you've got the one supernal breath, and then you have the division into the 10 utterances. Dibur, speech, divides the hevel, the breath, into many different combinations of letters. And these are the huge division in the worlds. Elef alofim, thousands, millions, hayesh misva Likutei. As it says, is there a number to his troops, in the sense that there is a huge multifariousness and division and diversity in the worlds. V'zeu baruch Hashem malachav. This is the meaning of the pasuk. Blessed is Hashem, his angels, giborei koyach, the ones of immense strength, oisei devarei, who do his word, lishmaya bekel devarei, who listen to his word, devarei daika, his word, meaning that they are all creations of his word. Mipnei shehem chayim v'kayamim, mebechinas devar Hashem, because all the angels exist and live as a production from the word of Hashem. Shehu bechinas gilui moitzepi Hashem, which is a revelation of the mouth of Hashem, lios ribui his chalkos anivroim, producing huge division in the creation, v'tzirufi oisias, through combinations of letters, shemehem, from which chayim hanivroim, the creations live. Heim bechinas hashemos. These are all the various different names with which the creations are given. And they are the names of all the various creations, each one being called a name, such as the camp of Michael. In other words, all the various different divisions of angels are given different names, and these names represent the combination of letters with which they are made, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Shara Yichud Emunah. And so it is of all the various different creations in this world. As it says, Vayikra Adam Shemes, the Adam called the creations by name. And of course, this wasn't just by consensus, in the sense that people agreed to call this animal by this name. Rather, Adam Harishon perceived the spiritual source of each animal, and when he called an animal a name, so for example, he gave the name Shor to an ox, is because he perceived that the spiritual energy to create the ox was a combination of the energies contained within the letters Shin, Vav, and Resh, Shor. And therefore, these names of the creation are literal names, tzirufi oisius, combinations of letters, moitzepi havaya, which exit the mouth of Hashem, which in terms of spheres, the mouth of Hashem is Malchus of Atzilus, and as the flow comes through Malchus Peh, the mouth of Hashem, the Hevel, the supernal breath, gets divided into various combinations of letters, creating all the various divisions in the supernal worlds, in the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and thereafter, ultimately, the diversity in this world, in the world of Asiya, and each one has a name. This is all in the revealed worlds. And there are hidden worlds which are not revealed, which are the source of the revealed worlds. And everything that there is in the revealed worlds, it necessarily has a source in the concealed worlds. As our sages say, you don't have a blade of grass below that doesn't have its spiritual source above. And that chain goes higher and higher. As it's written, that high beings have a higher being which is above them. So in other words, there's a chain order. Everything physical down here has a spiritual source, and that spiritual source has a higher spiritual source, and so on. Now, everything that we've spoken about now is a production of the Dvar Hashem, the word of Hashem. However, Yisrael arose in Hashem's thought. Pirush, which means bebechinas almin stimin, that they arose in the hidden worlds. So that, for example, is like thought. That is the concealed element of the speech. Because speech reveals that which was in thought. And that which in a person's mind they can scan in one scan, and it can take a very short time to grasp in that one scanner concept. They would need to use many words in order to express that single scan of the mind. Because the power of thought is superior in that respect to speech. The reason being, because thought is an inner garment of the soul, which is always bound with the soul, and therefore it's continually working, and it can grasp in a short scan much more than it would take to speak. In other words, to speak out a thought would take a lot of words, and that is all contained in one short scan of the mind. And thought is literally something from nothing which comes from the soul. And therefore, it's written, that is why it's written that Adam called names for all the animals and for the birds of heaven, Shehem Bechinas Malachim, which is a reference to the angels, Pnei Aryeh, the face of the lion, Pnei Sher, the face of the ox, Pnei Nesher, the face of the eagle, V'chulu. V'heim Hashem is Michal v'Gavriel, and these are the names Michal v'Gavriel. Shehem heim atzilufi yoser shemehem nimshuchu v'nisavu me'ayin liyashba b'chinas dvar Hashem. Because these are the letters with which these animals and birds, meaning the angels of the Merkava, were created. So Michael, the group of angels called Michael, was created by the combination of the letters Mem, Yud, Chaf, Aleph, Lamed, and Gavriel with the letters Gimel, Veis, Reish, Yud, Aleph, Lamed, and so on. However, the Pasuk attests and says that Adam, he didn't find a mate opposite him. Pirush Ezer hu b'china shem. The Ramban says that the word Ezer here means a name. In other words, just as it says previously, that Adam gave names to all the animals and the birds, but he didn't find an Ezer for himself, which means he didn't find a name for himself. The reason is because the soul, before it comes down into the body, doesn't have a name. Because its source from where it is hewn is from the level of machshava, the hidden worlds, which are not revealed. In other words, the concept of a name exists in the Alman de Iskalion, in the revealed worlds, and that comes from the Dvar Hashem, that comes from the speech of Hashem. The tziruf of Osi is the combination of letters which create. So when you have combinations of letters which create, you can call this Michal, you can call this Gavriel, and so on and so forth. That's on the level of Dibur. However, Yisrael, Ola b'machshava. Yidden, however, went up in machshava. And on the level of machshava, that is called Almin Stimin, the hidden worlds. And there you don't have a name. And that's why it says, Ola Adam, lo motza ezer kenegdoi. Adam couldn't find a name because his neshama was from Almin Stimin, from the hidden worlds. And there, that's on the level of machshava. Avram Yitzchak, that which we do give names to people, Avram and Yitzchak, etc., who achrei hislabshus hanashama beguf. That is, once the soul comes within the body, then you can give it a name. However, the soul itself doesn't have a name. V'zeu echad hoya Avram. This is the meaning that Avram was one, Pirush. Hoya, he was. Shekoidem biyas hanashama legufe, meaning before his soul came into his body, hoya bebechinas echad, he was one. Dahainu bebechinas hamachshava shemisachedis im hanefesh. Meaning he was on the level of thought, which was one with the soul. The heim bechinas almastimin, and that's a reference to the hidden worlds. Sheheim misyachtem be'oren sof baruch mamish, which are one with the oren sof. Bebechina shekoidem boya lidei gilui ha'olamas lias ischalkas an levroi me alma dipruda. Because that is on the level prior to its revelation in the worlds, which are divided in these worlds of division. Lachein, therefore, ba'adam arishan, that's why in Adam arishan, hoyu klulim shishim rubi neshamas, there was included 600,000 souls bebechina achas, in one. V'hainu lefi, the reason is shemeker hanashama, because the source of his soul, hilamayla bebechina sischalkos on Ivram canal, was much higher than any division of creation. And that's why his soul could contain within it so many other souls, because it was on the level of thought, and Almin Stimin are not the hidden worlds. Siv base. Now, after these true words, Yesh Lahavin, we need to understand what advantage does the soul have when it comes to this world? When it becomes enclosed in the physical body, because since in the source from where it was hewn, it was enveloped and united with the Oren Soba Bechinis Machshava, in the level of Machshava, Bechinis Alman Stimin, in the hidden worlds, Lamaila Maila, Bechinis Shem, much transcendence of a name, Ubechinis Devar Hashem, Alman Diskalman Kanel, and the word of Hashem in the revealed worlds, as we've explained. In other words, since the neshama comes from the level of machshava, of thoughts, which is much higher than the level of dibur, In other words, the Dvar Hashem creates names and division. The soul comes from the level of machshava. So what advantage does the soul have coming down into this world? It's written, Yached levavi liyira shemecha. Unite my heart to fear your name. And also we daven in the brach of Avasalam before we say Shema. Yachid levaveinu. Unite our heart. What does that mean? In the matter is, there is the desire of the heart. Shehu rotzen alev. Rusa deliber means the rotzen alev, the will of and desire of the heart. And you have two levels in the rotzen of the heart, of Rusa deliber. Pnimius v'chitzonius. You have the inner level and the outer level. Pnimis nekudas alev he. The inner level of the rotzen alev is bechinas ava rabba, is the great love, shalamayla mehatan vadas, which transcends any rhyme, reason, or logic. It's received from above as a gift. As it says, a gift Hashem gave to the Kohanim, that their service was on the level of a gift. In other words, the service of the Kohanim represents this Ahava Rabbah, the tremendous love which one has for Hashem, and that was a gift. Whereas in contrast, Chitzonius Halev, the external part of the heart, is generated from meditation and pondering the greatness of Hashem, each one according to their ability. And according to one's intellectual grasp of the concept of the Ein Sof, commensurately does a person arouse love in their heart. In other words, the Chitzonis Halev, the Re'usa Deliber, the desire of the heart, in Chitzonius is generated by his Boinanus, and that is each one according to their ability, how much they can grasp the concept of Ein Sof intellectually, thereby arousing an emotion in the heart. Now we know God made opposites in the world. Just as there is the concept of das, of knowledge, in the holy realm, which means to know Hashem and to love Him, so too there is knowing in the side of unholiness, and that is the evil das, to love strange matters, ulatava levakesh nifrod machmas sha'arav lechikoi masikos elam hazavatanu. And it's the desire to desire things which are separate from godliness, because it's sweet to the palate, and the sweetness of this world and its pleasures are seductive and inviting and luring. Because of that, a person can be drawn away from Hashem. And the attachment to that is the das coming from Klip and Sitra Achra. It's explained in Tanya that this is the challenge which Beinanim face, that each one, both the das of Kedusha and the das of Klippa, try to rule the mind. And the nations fight against each other. When one prevails, the other falls. That is all in Chitzonis Halev. However, the love which is in the inner heart, which transcends any logic, but it comes from above as a gift. There is no opposite side of that in the realm of unholiness. Shebechinas pnimis nekudas alev hi bechinas yichida, because that inner quintessence of the heart is called yichida, she'ein lo ela rotzen echad le'aviyah shebashamayim, which has a singular desire for Hashem in heaven. V'hi hamayla b'hamadrege she'in dugmasa v'loi be'erka nimsa b'gashmis klal, and that is a level which has no comparison and nothing like it at all in the physical world. Rak Hashem levadei, but it's completely focused and directed to Hashem. Nimsa b'bnei Yisrael am kirevei, and it's to be found by Yidden, who are his nation. K'moshe Kosav, as it says, ki am k'shei oirev hu v'salachta v'gemer, that they are a stiff-necked nation, and therefore he'll forgive them. What does that mean? Pirish k'shei oirev v'chines rotzun shalamayla me'atam v'das, k'moshe yispo b'makam acher. Stiff-neckedness here is explained as an advantage, that they have the ability to transcend logic, rhyme, and reason, and they can serve Hashem out of complete attachment and obedience, which transcends any logic. And from that comes the level of forgiveness. And when a person arouses this great love, easily a person can prevail over any negativity, because the forces of evil don't have any place there at all. And that's the request, that my heart should be united. Our heart should be one. The request is that the outer will and desire of the heart should be enveloped within the inner will. And now we understand this fourth level of af. In other words, we said there's machshav dibur u'maisa, barosiv yitzatzev and asisiv, but there's another word, af, which comes before the word asisiv. She'af marba oid bechina echad. The word af includes another level. V'hu bechinas ratzon ha'elyon shalamayla mayla bechinas machshav dibur u'maisa. And the word af hints to this Ratzon ha'elyon, the supernal desire, which transcends any thought, speech, or action. You may ask, why is it juxtaposed to the word asisiv? Asiya, action. The samach la'asisiv, it's next to the word asisiv. Lefi she'ikir gilui ratzon zeh, because the principal revelation of this desire, hu be'bechinas asiya gashmi dafka, is in physical actions. Dahainu b'maisa ha-mitzvahs, in mitzvah performance. Liyas batel ritzoincha mipnei ritzoinoi, when a person nullifies their own desire in the face of Hashem's desire, b'sur meirav asei tov, in turning away from evil and doing good. Uremach mitzvahs asei heim remach hamshoches ratzon ha'elyon, and the 248 positive mitzvahs correspond on parallel the 248 diffusions of Hashem's will in this world. And the beginning is stuck in the end, meaning that the very highest will of Hashem is specifically here in the world of Asiya, in the world of action, that Hashem's will is performed. As he says in the parenthesis, this is one concept that we have explained beforehand in Parsha Shlach, that specifically in this world do souls have the dynamic of movement, which they can attain in this world, the level of B'chol Ma'odecha, which is a infinite movement without any restraints of any vessels. V'hainu al yidei mitzvahs, and that can be achieved through mitzvah performance. Lefi shehem hamshachas makifim mebechinas seviv kol almin al neran lahaloisam. Because when a person performs mitzvahs, they bring upon them the level of seviv on the nefesh ruach and neshama to elevate them. That through seeking out the pnimius of Hashem, the panim of Hashem, this is how a person achieves that level. Close the parenthesis. And this is what is written in the Shema. Pirush, Beis Bechinas Leiv Pnimis V'chitzenis. When we say you should love Hashem b'chol levavecha, with all your heart, it means with both levels of the heart, with the Pnimis Alev and the Chitzenis Alev. Rak sheyev shalav lebechinas Pnimis ad sheyagir v'yaseh tchila bechinas Chitzenis hanolda mehadas. However, this must go with a seder. You can only reach the Pnimius Halev if you start with the Chitzenis Halev. And that has to come through his bonus. Because a person needs to move step by step from below, first through his bonus and revealing Chitzenis Halev, and then receiving as a gift the Pnimius Halev. Ein b'mashkasa b'divrei Ramaskal kisishma b'koil shasarich liyas geseder hamadreges tchila mafteches hachitzenis. First there needs to be the outer keys and then the inner keys. Ein sham v'seif divrei Ramaskal svartel chame machras ha-Shabbos u'b'divrei Ramaskal hatem nitzavim ki hine yesh b'bechinas tzaikas halei beis bechinas chula. V'zeh u'inyin kol ha'aricha shelifnei krishma. So now we understand why there's such a lengthy introduction in davening to Shema. The Psuke de Zimri in the verses of praise, the Brichas Shalifnei Krishma Kaneda, and the blessings before Shema, as is well known. Because a person needs to use those Psukim as a hisboinanus, a meditation which will reveal the Chitzenis Alev, the Ru'usa deliver the desire of a heart, Bechitzenius, and then one reaches the Shema when B'chol Levavecha, when it can be united with the Pnimis Alev. And now we will understand the advantage that the soul has when it comes down here into this world, clothed within a body. Because although before it came down, it was united with its source on the level of supernal thought, as we explained beforehand, that the neshama is on the level of machshava almin stimin. Nevertheless, that level of machshava, at the end of the day, is only a garment. It's taka, an inner garment of the soul, but it's still a garment. However, it's not united with its root in its creator completely. To be enveloped literally within the Ohr Ein Sof, in which no thought can grasp him at all. Pirush, which means that it doesn't touch the very essence, but rather it's clothed in it. However, when the neshama comes down from that level, and it comes into a body, and it has generated through Re'usa de Liba, the Chitzenius Alev and the Pnimius Alev, Kadiskafia sitra achir, and it suppresses the sitra achra, the other side. Lias battle and it nullifies its will in the face of Hashem's will. Basur meirav aseitov, in turning away from evil and doing good. Bebechinas asiya gashmias, performing physical mitzvahs, b'maisiyah mitzvahs asur meira kanal, and turning away from evil. In other words, doing both the positive mitzvahs and the negative mitzvahs. Hari rotzana elyon, then the supernal will, shahu ein sa baruch hu ba'atzmei b'chvoidai, the very rotzana elyon, the desire of Hashem, which is in the Oyer and Sof Baruch Hu, b'chvoidai ba'atzmei, in his full essence and glory, shora umiskalaboy, that becomes rested and revealed within the person. Uremach pikudim heim remach ivorim demalka mamish, and the 248 mitzvahs of Hashem literally become the 248 limbs that correspond to the 248 limbs of the king. So when a person does a mitzvah, they are literally connected with the king themselves. Not just with the level of machshava, in other words, the soul in the higher in the world of Gan Eden, and the highest of worlds there is on the level of thought. But at the end of the day, that level is only a garment to the soul. Is only a garment, is only a lavush. However, when the soul comes down here into this world, and there's this kafir sitra achra, and there's a suppression of the other side, and a person literally connects with Hashem in mitzvah performance with asiyah, af asisiv, that the af, which is that level which transcends Barasav Yitzharativ and Asisa, because that af refers to the level of Ru'usa, the liver, the Pnimius Halev, that is the Hashra, the resting of the Ratzana Elyon within the Oren Sof itself. That's why Chazal said, Yofa Shah Achas, better 1 hour down here in this world, Mikol Chaye Olam Haba, because true Chaye Olam Haba is Ziva Shchina, that's a revelation of the level of Almin Stimin, the hidden worlds, which is Machshava, which is thought. However, coming down to this world, through 1 hour of Tshuva and Masan Tovim in this world, a person can access not just the garment of thought, which, true, it's very attached to the soul, but it's not the soul itself. However, the very essence of the Matzil, of the Creator, the Oyer and Sof Baruch Hu itself, which is the Ratzon Elin, the supernal desire, that is wedged in mitzvah performance, beguf down here. That's why the word af, which that's the level it hints to, is connected with the word asisiv. Be'inyan iu v'chayei chad, v'ayim hashkosav al-posav v'yeshiv yang v'pirish toili teiras picha me'al v'zov v'chesed. In other words, the Torah of your mouth is greater than Alfei Sa'ava Chesed, meaning of Ava and Yira, that when a person keeps the Torah down here, a person accesses literally the Oren Sof Baruch Hu right in the world of Asiyah, Af Asisiv.
Jewish audio on Chabad.org.
Likutei Torah, Parshas Balak, page 67d, Seif Gimel. V'zehu mispar esrei v'Yisrael. Ki hine ksiv, because it's written, v'hoya mispar b'nei Yisrael k'chol hayom, asher lo yimed v'lo yisofer, that the number of the b'nei Yisrael will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. Ubi Gemara, and in the Gemara in Yuma, Daf Chof Beis Amud Aleph, Rami Ahadodi asks that there seems to be a contradiction. Kasiv v'hoya mispar, it says, and the number will be. Uchasiv, and it's written, asher lo yimad v'lo yisofer, then it's not numbered. So, can it be counted or not? Umeshane, and the Gemara answers, Kan kasha oisin ritzoyna shal mokem, that when the Yidden do the will of Hashem, then it cannot be counted. It's numerous. Ulevayer ha'inyan, and to explain this, tzarich lahavin ma'u kechol hayom, we need to understand why it says that the number of the Bnei Yisrael will be like the sand of the sea. What is so special about the sand of the sea? Because Soviv Hayomim V'Hanohoris, around seas and rivers, Hakarka Huchoil, the ground is sand. Shehu Yovish, it's dry. Umefoired L'Chalokim, and it is cracked and split into many granules and pieces. Masha'enkin Shar Afar Ha'oretz, whereas in contrast, other parts of the earth, Heimrigve Adama, they are clods of earth, Lachim, which are wet, Umedubokim Ktsas, and they are glued to each other. It's like a one clod. It's not granules which are all divided. V'hainu lefi, the reason is, shahamayim asher b'yamim unaharis, because the water which is in the seas and the rivers, heim shoyavim halachluchis, they draw out all the wetness, mikol karka shesavivam, from all the ground surrounding them. Lekach, therefore, nisharu biyaveshus, therefore the surrounding ground is dry, upirud, and it's divided, it's in granules, like the sand. V'hanimshul, so Yidden are compared to Choil Hayom, so the analog is, hu bechlalas chayes ha'olamas, it can be compared to the general life force of the worlds, bidvar havaya v'ruach piv, hamahava kol hanivroim miyayin liyesh, the word of Hashem and the spirit of his mouth, which creates all creations, something from nothing. Hinei ksiv, it's written, vayas es hayom, that he made the sea, oimed al shnei asar bokor, vayom aleim elamayla. In Malachim, Aleph, Siman Zayin, it's written that when Shlomo HaMelech built the Beis HaMikdash, he built a basin which carried water, that was called the sea, and it was placed upon 12 oxen. Pirush, Lefi shebechinas hayom oimed melamayla berichuk makom. That means that the sea, which was standing from above, was at a distance. Lekach nasu yud beis bakar bechinas pirud vehischalkus b'mispar yud beis, which is why it was placed on 12 oxen, all separate, with the number 12. V'hu, the reason being, ki hisavas me'ayin liyedsh b'midas malchusi yisbarach, because creation, something from nothing, through the medium of the Sephira of Malchus, Hamisnase Mimois Olam, which is exalted from the days of the world, Umalchuscha Malchus Kol Elamim, and his Malchus is the Malchus of all the worlds, Ulefishahu Rama Misnase Mehem, and because it's exalted from them, Nasu Bechinas Am, they are made in a way that they are a people, Miloshen Oimamus, like coals which are separate, Dvorim, Zorim, V'nifrodim, individual and separate entities. Ki ein melech b'loyam, because there's no king without a people. V'hisavas b'bechinas am, and the creation of a people, hu b'bechinas hisnasas hamelech atzmoi, comes through the exalted nature of the king himself, memele yodim liyos bebechinas am, and therefore, automatically, because the king is exalted, they, the people, are on a lower level of an am. U'kamoshal hamelech hayeshav al kisoi, like a king who sits on his throne, shemach mas zeb, because of that exaltedness, zoim v'nirtoim hakol milefanov, all those who are before him tremble, v'nasim shvelim lefanov, and they become lowly before him. V'lochen, and therefore, mebechinas malchusa yisbarach, it is from the Sephira of Malchus, Shehu Bechinas Ein Sof V'Tachlis, which the sphere of Malchus is infinite to no end. Naso v'nishavu oilamus bali gvul. It's from there specifically that worlds which are limited are created. Bebria yitzira asiya. Gam kein bebechinas ein sof v'tachlis. And in those worlds themselves, there are infinite levels. K'meshikosav, as it's written, Hayesh mispar Likutei Dubov. Is there a number to his troops? But since they get their life energy and they are established from the exalted nature of Malchus, therefore, they descend in a manner in which they are divided and separate, into many multifarious different levels and echelons. So, that being the case, how do they receive their life from the midah of Malchus, which is exalted from them? In truth, al zeh ksiv, on that it is written, Ki shemesh u'magen Hashem Elokim, that the sun is compared to the name Havaya, and Elokim to a magen, to a shield. V'hu koyach Eloki, shehu kol yochel, v'hein hein gevurosav. This is a koyach Eloki which has any capacity to do anything, and this is an expression of his power. As it's written in Shara Yichud Ve'emun and Tanya. Ach derech klal, in general, ha-hisnasus, the exaltedness, hu bechinas histalkus, is in a way of removal, sheyorad hachayas aleim kolkach, which retains the energy and doesn't allow so much chayas to go down. V'hu kamoshal hamayim sheshevim aleim halachluchis, it's like the sea, which draws out the liquid from the surrounding earth, v'nasa al sfosei choil, thereby creating at the side of the sea sand, bechinas pirut kanal, which is in granules, each granule independent. V'hine bechinas mispar hazeh, now this number, einoi mispar mamish, is not a literal number, K'dichsiv hayesh mispar, as it's written, is there a number to his troops? Ela shehu nikras begeder mispar, but it's put in the parameters of number, mipnei shehu mefuzar u'mefoirer lechalokim, because it has been divided into parts. V'yochel lochal aleim shem mispar, and one could potentially give a number to it. Avalena mispar mamish, but it's not literally a number, ki lo yisofer mirov, because it's too numerous to count. Kamoshal chayil hayom, like the sand of the sea, asher lo yisofer mirov, which cannot be counted because of its being too numerous. Rak hu begeder bechinas mispar. So when we say that it's in the parameters of mispar, of numbers, it can be counted. Why? Mipnei shemefoirer lechalokim, because it's been divided into parts. And since each part and each granule of sand is separate from the other, therefore it's possible to apply the concept of numbers to it, although it is actually too numerous to count. Now it's written that the number of Bnei Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael heim ha'oisim b'chinas mispar, that the Bnei Yisrael, they are the ones that create this entity of counting. Sheheim ha'mamshichim b'chinas malchusi yizbarach, because they are the ones that draw down the level of malchus, liyos malchusei malchus kol olamim, that his malchus should be a malchus of all the worlds. The Hainu, how do they draw that level of Malchus down, al yidei mitzvahs maisias. It's through mitzvah performance. Shenikroim mitzvahs hamelech, which these mitzvahs are called the mitzvahs of the king. Parenthesis, v'ay masha kosavta li'it mizeh gamkin li'il parshas ba'midbar, seif dibar ha'masra v'haya misa b'nei Yisrael mispar, hayna b'chidas ha'mitzvahs chulu ayin shon. Close the parenthesis. V'la'chein, and therefore, eimrim lifnei kol mitzvah, we say before each mitzvah, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam, shehu hamshachas oir ein sof baruch hu, li'ez melech ha'olam kenis galil. The idea of the bracha is to draw down the oir ein sof, so that it should be drawn down into the world through the midah of Malchus, as explained elsewhere. And since it is a drawing down of the Ohr Ein Sof literally, lachein therefore, eino rak begeder mispar, it's only that it comes within the parameters of numbers. Ve'eino mispar mamish, yet one cannot count it because it's too numerous. And that's what is meant in the Gemara in Yuma, that when Yidden do the will of Hashem, then they cannot be counted. In other words, when they're doing mitzvahs, then they draw down the Ohr Ein Sof into the midah of Malchus, and then it cannot be counted, or they cannot be counted, because what is created is too numerous. When they draw down the supernal will in mitzvah performance, shehu Ohr Ein Sof baruch hu, which is the light of the Ohr Ein Sof, and that is when they do the mitzvah joyfully from the innermost quintessence of the heart, as it's written, Pikudei Hashem Yisharem Samche Lev, that the mitzvahs of Hashem are upright, they rejoice the heart. And it's written, Tachas Hashaloi Avarta As Hashem Elekecha B'simcha V'tuv Levav Merev Koil, that the reason why the klolos, the curses came, is because you did not serve Hashem, your God, with joy and gladness of heart, out of abundance of everything. Pirush Meirov Koil, what does it mean? Meirov Koil, out of abundance of everything. Hainu bli gevul lemaila adein kates or lemata adein tachlis bebechinas ein sof kanal. Meirov Koil means that you didn't serve Hashem in an infinite way, above and below. Parenthesis, V'ayin mashakosim iseh b'divra masal menoiras zov b'divra masal savitz b'nei Yisrael chulu as korbani lachmi gabe hekter chelav atomid. V'ayin mashakosim me'inin pirush oisin retzoyne shal mokem b'parsha shlach al posuk mekeshesh eitzim. V'ayin mashakosim me'inin simcha shal mitzvah b'bir al posuk tzenu rena chulu ba'atora she'itra loy imoy. Umizeh yuven eich al yidei simcha shal mitzvah mamshichim kesa de malchus hanikras ritzena shal mokem. Through simcha shal mitzvah one draws the crown of malchus, which is what Chazal mean when they say oisin ritzena shal mokem. Mebechinus hamadrega hayesa elyena. V'zeu oisin ritzena al derech v'asisem atem ki'ilu asuni. This is the expression oisim that they actually make the rotzen of the mokem. They generate that rotzen, the keser of malchus, through the simcha shal mitzvah. Close the parenthesis. V'zeu es reva Yisrael chelek hadalet, and this is the reference of to Reva Yisrael, the fourth chelek, bechinas af osisif, which, as we've explained previously, is the level of af osisif. Shom there. Ugilui Ratzon Elyon Daika Kanal. There, in the mitzvah performance, is the revelation of the Ratzon Elyon. V'gam Roiva Miloshan Arba. Another translation of Roiva is the number 4. Ki bezeh, because with that, nichlal kol daled bechinas machshava dibur u'maisa v'ratzon. You have included all the 4 levels of thought, speech, deed, and will. Ubezeh yuven dechsiv. And with this it's understood that which is written, Mi mono afar Yaakov u'mispar v'gomer, the ma'ashakosov u'mispar, because that which is written u'mispar koi refers al mi mono, to the question who is to count. Klomer, she'ein mispar, that there is no number. V'afal pikein u'mispar ksiv, but nevertheless it's written that there is a number. The mashma sheyesh mispar, which implies that there is a number. Elo inyan kanal, but rather the matter is, as we have explained, shehu begeder mispar ve'ena mispar mamash, that it comes within the parameters of numbers, because it's separate and divided, but nevertheless it's too numerous to be counted. Lefi shehu hamshachas rotzen elyin as reva Yisrael kanal bechinas asisiv kanal, because this refers to the drawing down of the Rotzen ha'elyon in mitzvah performance, which is the Reva Yisrael, the 4th element, the afosisif, in this world. Seif Dalet. V'hinei kol zehu b'chinas yichuda tator b'maiseh ha'mitzvahs. All of the above is the level of yichuda tator, the lower level of unity achieved in mitzvah performance. Lahamshich rotzen elyon bebechinas mispar bechinas asisiv kanal, drawing down the rotzen elyon into the numbers, into the level of asisiv, as we've explained. Ach Talmud Torah keneged kulam. However, the learning of Torah is equal to them all. Shehu bechinas yichuda ilah, because limud haTorah is on the level of the upper level of unity. V'zeu mi mona afar Yaakov. This is what it means. Who can count the dust of Yaakov? Ki afar eina begeder mispar klal, because afar cannot be counted at all. V'hu bechinas Talmud Torah. That's a reference to learning Torah. Lefi shehurat soni is barach mamish, because Torah is literally Hashem's will. Ulekach, and therefore, hu bechinas yichuda ilah, it's on the higher level of unity. Bechinas bitul eiren sav baruch hu mamish, v'yichud chabad v'chabad. It is a nullification, literally, to the eiren sav, and a unity of one's mind, the Chabad, with the Chabad of Torah. Umasnisa malkasa kanal, and as expressed previously, the learning of a person, the Mishnah, is the king. Ve'ena begeder mispar klal, and it's not within the parameters of numbers at all. Parenthesis. V'ay masha kosavta liyo b'divra mascha b'shor shehikdimu Yisrael nasa l'nishma bepirush eis lakoil chayfetz tachas Hashem eshayin sham umezeh yuven yosef masha kosav da'atena nikras offer she'ena begeder mispar klal shehu gush echad. Torah is called offer, which cannot be counted because it's like one lump. And that's why somebody who engages in learning the halachas of an oila, it's as if they offered an oila, even if they are learning the halachas of the oila at a time that is not the correct time for offering the oila. It's a general, nevertheless it's included. Whereas in contrast, when it comes to mitzvahs, they are all in a specific time, and each one has a specific moment to do that mitzvah. The reason is the Torah is the desire or the will of all wills. This is the meaning where it says, sanctify us with your mitzvahs and give us our portion in your Torah. Through the mitzvahs, one achieves the level of kiddushin, of marriage, ve'irastichli, becoming betrothed to Hashem. Whereas in contrast, through Torah, one draws down the inner level, v'yodata as Hashem, knowing Hashem. V'ha'inyan nafshaloyma, ki im hayois sha'alidei ha-mitzvahs nimshach b'chinas gilui rotzen ha'elyon b'nefesh, that although through the mitzvahs one draws down the rotzen ha'elyon in one's soul, or b'chinas avarabba, with great love, ach ki gam b'rotzen elyon yesh gam ken b'chinas chitzenis u'pnimis. Nevertheless, even in the rotzen ha'elyon, there is an inner and an outer level. So too in the revelation of Ava Rabba and great love in the Nefesh, yesh gam ken based bechinas of two levels. One level is drawn through mitzvahs, and the second והמשוחס בכינס אהבה בצענוגים שורשים בבכינס פנימיס הרוצן העליון ונמשך על ידי התורה, and the second is drawn through Torah. כדכתיב as is written ושעשועי בני אדם וזהו חכמס אדם תורה פניו היינו בכינס פנימיס. That's what it means, that the wisdom of a person illuminates his face, meaning his pnimis. וכמו שכתוב בפסוק החלילי עיניים מיין שיש בכינס אהבה רבה because there is a level of Ava Rabba, and then there's a level of Ava B'Tzanugim which is greater. Close the parenthesis. However, what is the way that a person will merit the light of the Torah on the level of the upper level of unity? It's through Yaakov who is and manifests the midah of rachamim, of mercy. Dahainu, which means la'oire rachamim rabim al nafshay, that a person should arouse great mercy on his soul, b'kvias itim, with fixed times, kanoida shas rotzen, she'es rotzen hu b'chatzais, as is known, that a very auspicious time for this is midnight. And also at the time of davening. Because there is, in the order of davening and in the verses of praise, psukim which express Hashem's mercy. And then, hu eis rotzen, it's an auspicious moment, la'oire rachmim al nafshay, to arouse mercy on one's soul. V'zeu midasa shel Yaakov, and this is why it's called the midah of Yaakov, Yud Ekev. Shehu inyan harachmanos al bechinas Yud chachmei la, shenafle v'yarda lebechinas Yank Ekev kanal. Because this is the tremendous rachmanos on the Yud, which represents Chochma Ilah, supernal wisdom, which has fallen and descended into the Ekev, into the heel. Now, Midasa Shal Yaakov, the Midah of Yaakov, Mavriach Men Elakotza, it goes from one extreme to the other. Lahakim Me'ofar Dal, and it has the capability of raising the destitute from the dust. Raising it to the highest level of the upper level of unity. Parenthesis. Also, the translation of offer is, as it says, that my soul should be to all like dust. Val yedei zeh, and through that, psach libi b'seirasecha. V'ayim mashikosim iseh beparshas, vayakel al posuk kuchu meyitchem truma, v'gam k'maymer azal, kachi darka shol teira, pas b'melech teichel, chulu v'al orez tishon, close the parenthesis. Ach Amr Razal, however, Chazal said, Kol ha'isa b'Torah levad, that anybody who just learns Torah, it's not good enough. Ela tzorich liyas Torah and gemilas chasadim, there needs to be Torah together with acts of kindness. V'lochin ksiv, and therefore it's written, U'misparas Revei Yisrael, b'chinas asisiv b'masa mitzvahs, and therefore here you have the Mispar as Revei Yisrael, you must have also the level of Asisif, mitzvah performance, or Maisa Hatzdaka, and deeds of Tzedakah, Hanikras B'Shei Mitzvah Stam, which is called Stama Mitzvah, Sheshkula Keneged Kol HaMitzvahs, which is equal to all the mitzvahs. V'hu inyan gemilas chasadim. V'ayim mashkosa b'divra mask l'sishma b'koil, gabe lishmeir es kol mitzvahsov. Parenthesis, V'ayim b'zoyim mishpatim daf kuf hei, Bepirush mi mana chulu, umispar chulu, v'hainu gam kein inyin yichude ilah, v'yichude tata. Ki mi hainu yichud chachma ubina, alefcha chachma, alefcha bina. Mispar, hainu yichud hamidas, v'hadibur v'hu inyin yasa sholem li, sholem yasa li. V'ay mashakosab al-pasuk, eile b'kudei ha-mishkan, mishkan ha-eidos chulu, ובביר הפוסק ונקדש בסך בני ישראל. ולפי מה שכוסה בפרדס ערך מי יש למה, שזהו עניין שער החמישים. מינון שערי בינה, שבוי ניתנה תורה בחג השבוס. ועושי שפה דמי מונה עפר ינקב כוי על התורה, חולו, ועין מה שכוסה בביר מאמר הזל בשעה שהקדימי ישראל נעשה חולו, מי גילה חולו, V'ayin ma shekasa bebir ha-pasuk usvartzam lachem chulu, tisperu 50 yom. V'ayin oid me'inyin roiva Yisrael bezoyer parshas Balak. V'ayin ma shekasav taliyil parsha shlach be'inyin v'niskei revi'as hahin.